Okay, dear friends, dear colleagues, I'm going to address you in English, although I know that there are many people here who speak our languages because we have our guests online who are actually following us in different languages, so English will be the one. I'm happy to welcome you all to the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory at the University of Belgrade for presentation of the project results of the project named Youth Agency, New Political Imaginaries in the Western Balkans. The project actually started with everything what is happening around us. I'm quite aware that you know that in Serbia we are like for 19 months facing the protests which are initiated by the students, and therefore young generation is something which is very, very much in the focus in Serbia, but I would say also in the region. And the idea of this project was actually to explore a little bit in depth what are the perceptions of the young generations when it comes to their own lives in in our countries in the Western Balkans, how they see, as we named it, new political imaginaries, minding everything experimental, what we see in Serbia in the past months. We actually wanted to know a little bit more about the ideas, perception, and maybe some new innovative tools for actually engaging into political life and maybe something different than what we see in mainstream politics. What we have during this almost 12 months now is actually several deliberative workshops that I'm going to have my dear colleague Irena Fiket present here. We had a support towards to 15 postdoctoral students and researchers from the region, mostly from the region. Those who are not coming from the region actually are working within the region, who were working in this topic. And another Irena actually will say a few words about that, but we have representatives of this generation here with us also. I have to thank very, very sincerely to Open Society Foundation, which actually supported very generously this project and which is generously supporting this institute for a long time already. Without you, definitely we wouldn't be able to do many, many programs within the institute and within the region, because this is a part of the regional initiative provisionally named Regional Network for Centers for Advanced Studies, which is gathering 8 universities around the region, including Croatia and Slovenia, but also Albania from ex-Yugoslavia, so it's not only ex-Yugoslavia. And also to Erste Stiftung and Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which also gave some contribution to the activities of this project. I wouldn't take no more space for here. I would give a floor to Miodrag Milosavljevic, who joined us on behalf of Open Society Foundation Western Balkans. So, Miki.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you all here. Also, hi to colleagues who joined us online. First of all, thank you, Gazela, for the invitation, for the opportunity, also to the Institute for the opportunity also to join you here today after 2 days of intensive hackathon, as I heard, hopefully also a productive one. Since we have very little time for this introductory session, let me just say a couple of things why actually Open Society Foundations support this project. And this is one of the largest programs actually in the region that we support. So just a couple of words. A simple answer to that would be that RECAS ticks most or all the boxes actually that we care about, that checks all the problems that Open Society Foundations actually aspires to tackle as a relatively new entity in this shape as a regional foundation as well. But I'll tell you a little bit about that later. A longer answer would say that actually RECAS answers a couple of questions that we also often visit and revisit in our own context in the Open Society Foundations. First one is how to keep knowledge, talent, and critical thinking actually in the region. too often, I think our young generation, the brightest minds among us, are tempted to seek opportunities elsewhere, and RECAS actually creates a different path to that. Basically, offers and creates space for early career researchers to work across borders, collaborate with strong academic institutions as well. And what's most important, and what I learned from my friend Srđan and former colleague as well, to produce socially relevant research, which is also top priority for us, and it converges with the top priorities of RECAS. That's one thing. Another thing, you are aware that open societies depend on independent thought, informed public debate, critical thinking. Also, it depends on people who do not hesitate to ask questions, to challenge closed systems, but also people who have this ability to imagine better democratic futures. And this is something that also is important addition, and I believe the hackathon is also a great contribution to that, and we see that as an investment into democratic resilience, or as Srđan calls it, democratic infrastructure, another thing that I learned not only at the faculty but also from my dear friend. The third thing is regional cooperation. Recently, as I told you in the beginning, Open Society Foundations in the Western Balkans went through in-depth transformation. We merged the capacities of 5 Open Society Foundations present in the Western Balkans into a single entity, Open Society Foundations Western Balkans. And we, as of 2023, started working in this regional capacity. That's dominantly because the problems, the challenges that we face and that we want to address do not stop on national borders. That's what the main driving force. Actually, the harder the border is, the more important this regional approach is. And then finally, and I'll finish with this, as I already said, this project links science with decisions, with strategies, and this is something that we value very much also, and we are happy to see your ideas actually basically tapped into real policy processes in this country and around this region. So I'll stop here and give mic to Irena.
Thank you so much. Hello and welcome from me. As well. So as a coordinator of this process and as somebody who is following this development that this fellowship was as a beginning and now it's a project with several different very big activities over the year, I have a pleasure to announce and a little bit moderate this event that will showcase what we have been doing for almost a year right now, and I hope that we are going to continue doing it as well. So as Gazela said, this year was a year that we have many different activities, and those activities were not only a fellowship program that we started with, but also was a series of deliberative workshops in the region, engaging young people in discussion about democratic future and European integration, and also their opinions and feelings about it. But also it was a policy hackathon that ended just yesterday that was also collecting youth voices together with the voices of the fellows who are the seniors in all this process, who I guess generated something to look for, and I also think something that we will develop further. So throughout today, we are going to hear results and opinions and also experiences of our fellow colleagues that were the fellows of this year, but also results of deliberative workshops and also policy hackathon, but also additionally, we will hear results of the Open Society Foundation research on what does Gen Z tells us, which I think perfectly fits into what we have been doing for all this year that will shape this event in total. So now I have a pleasure to give a word to Srđan Kukolj and Vanja Škapova, who are fellows in the 2026 cohort. Vanja is from North Macedonia and Srđan is originally from Bosnia and Herzegovina, but now a resident of Serbia, that will tell us a little bit more about their experiences in the fellowship, their research, their essays, and the process that they have been participating in throughout now almost a year.
Thank you. Thank you, Rina. Thank you, colleagues. So let me first introduce myself to those of you that I haven't met yet. I'm Vanya Shkapova. I'm from North Macedonia. When I learned about this RECAS Fellowship, I was just finishing my PhD in anticipatory governance in migration policy in North Macedonia. And also, we just closed the UN agency that I was working in for many years in North Macedonia due to budgetary constraints. And the fellowship itself showed us a way to merge the things that I'm very passionate about, and this is policy making and influencing the policy making process and governance and research. So when I applied, I really was struck by the theme, by the youth agency, because we usually, when we're creating policies, we are looking at the policymakers are looking at horizons of 5 or 10 years or 15, 20 years, but rarely are people that are most affected, that is young people, asked about that. So the whole theme of the fellowship really resonated with me. And this gap is where the research began. Also at the same time, North Macedonia is going through writing its new migration resolution 2026-2030. It's using the similar methodology for that was using before for the previous one, 2020-2025, and this is in part using Foresight. Foresight being one of my expertise. That was where the methodology with young people came about. So the research was set up in two ways. One was interview with young people, so to hear their personal migratory futures, and then was using Foresight workshops where we can create together a vision for the country where these migration policies can come about. So, but the important thing about this, and this is again part of the fellowship and the program that I loved, was the emphasis on partnerships. So for this, I reached out to the UN agencies that were working on this. They introduced me to the people that were working, the intergovernmental group that was working on this migration resolution. And they made the connection. So the results from our research with young people can be later part of the new migration resolution 2026-2030 for North Macedonia. The research itself, methodologically, it involved 21 young people from 18 to 35. The partnerships again come into fruition because we had people from Skopje and different cities. When I reached out to different universities, different companies that also, you know, just to broaden the specters of young people to be part of the research. And also we got a help from the youth hub from city of Skopje, which hosted the workshops that we were doing. So it gives space for young people, you know, to be more neutral and to feel like they can, you know, share their opinions better. The results are very interesting because young people don't see the migration as we see, just a couple of policies that need to be changed. It's a more encompassing because for them it's more about the possibilities that they have in the country, in the region, or in Europe. Because again, North Macedonia from the region is one of the countries where outward migration of young people is the largest. I mean, even bigger than the other countries. So it's something that usually we, as countries or countries itself, think more about bringing back people, so those circular migration. But also with the research, it really came clear that the country needs to work on its democratic potential so the people can stay. So they are not willing to just leave the country if they have, you know, economy and environment and other opportunities that they search for abroad. So during this research, so in parallel, as I was doing this research, the fellowship offered a lot of resources for us. So this was very important. First, before we started our research, the kickoff meeting that we had here in the Institute really helped us all see where the potential lies in, because when you have a research proposal, it's really, if you talk to similarly thought people, you can see where it can lead. So this really helped. The kickoff meeting really helped, and it's also helped us network in a way that again helped us later with our research. Also, every week when we had the webinars that were organized, that really also helped us for formulating the background research and just share information and learning more about different researchers, more about different thoughts, and more about different studies. That really helped. And finally, for me personally, because one of the first, let's say, output that the research brought was the preliminary results to the migration working group, to the intergovernmental migration working group, and that coincided with the surgery week that we had. This is really what helped me when I was presenting my preliminary results from the colleagues to get feedback. What is more important to present to policymakers, because it's the same research, but it's really depends how we present it. For now, we have essays, and the essays are really broad because it's for general population. Later, we will be writing, probably some of us, journal papers. So this is more to the academic community. And then, this is the influence I was giving to the intergovernmental body were really more about something that they can influence. So it's really, you have to know your audience, and this is also where this really helped. Also, speaking of the academic part, it really helped that for my research concretely, that first that the workshops that were used the similar or the same methodology that was used by the intergovernmental body and the expert that was giving their workshop, that was hosting that workshop. So that professor and myself, hopefully, when the resolution will be published and the results will be published, we can write again some kind of article, writing where the convergence and divergence come from the people that are working in the migration policy and young people that are mostly affected by it. Because again, we are talking about 5-10-year policies. With all of this said, I would really like to thank RECAS for the opportunity. Personally, it's a big growth for me as a researcher. It opens doors that I really was not aware that of the intersection of research and policymaking that can be made, the influence that research can make on policymaking, and just that for the first time I feel that young people's voices can be actually heard this way as well. It's not just activism, but this is also a way that young people's voices can be heard. So this is something that I really am proud of, and this is something that I think I will take more to heart, that we can all work together. As I said, there were many partners, but that we can all work together, and if we have an idea, that we can really accomplish simultaneously multiple things. So thank you very much.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Trajan Kukel. I work at an environment regulatory institute here in Belgrade, which I guess speaks about my background, which is more close to the environment, but basically the environmental health is something that is more close to my heart, as I also been spending a lot of time actually in public health arena. And it's also something that teaches me a lot about profiling the communities across the region as well as the Europe. And also that gave me the idea actually to respond to the call when I see it for the first time. Even I never have been involved working with the youth generations like directly. I have worked with different other vulnerable populations. So basically that kind of, I would say, definition of vulnerability helped me to understand how I can shape actually my research around this topic. And I would be very honest here and telling that my idea was logic behind the definition of my thesis, and the idea is like that the people my age, like 40 plus and older, actually create the future for the younger generation without considering the reality of the youth that they are faced with. It comes from my passion also as an advocate, and also the part of me that will let those people 40 plus to do something like that, and which is like something I don't like. So my my research is actually about the postponement of decisions, political decisions in environmental protection, which leads to increase of vulnerability among young people across the region. So basically my research was focused on Serbia, Bosnia, North Macedonia, and Montenegro. I have been using the questionnaires, the interviews, and also the digital artifacts in order to actually do kind of triangulation to get all of this information, as I had not, as we do not have that a lot of literature in this topic specifically across the region. So basically I wanted to have kind of reference document after the research is done, so basically I can continue working on the topic, because I have the chance working in the policy a lot and faced with those who take the decisions when it comes to the environment and younger generations. So it was kind of challenging, because I never thought that I would find myself like really how to say, like pushing more like towards the youth to engage with the research and ask them the certain questions, like which actually refers to the future of them, but still understanding, as I'm also, I guess, missing the context of the present, that I couldn't really understood like how the young generation respond to such issues. And it was very interesting to see that the youth from different countries actually responded differently. That, for example, the Montenegrin youth have strong sense of belonging and willing to stay in the Montenegro and face the problems. So they are not really happy to flee or leave the country and leave it to the politicians, so basically they can continue working the business as usual. For example, in North Macedonia, young generations are quite more informed about like what the environmental risk factors are and how they've been exposed to, while the Bosnian and Serbian youths are looking to flee and go out of the country, as they do understand that the magnitude of the problem they are faced with, which is basically, when it comes to the policy analysis, you understand that that's really the truth. So I see that they're very aware like what is going on, and there is absolutely the certain level of anxiety what's going to happen next. And also one of the important things for me was actually to analyze the online arena, which I have went across the online social media platforms and blog posts to understand, as a region, do we respond to environmental crisis ad hoc, or basically we are trying to publish like more informative material, which has turned to be true, which is not always like just responding to the emergency, but basically doing something. But however, the all content is there. But what I didn't see is actually that youth in this case, or citizens in general, do not use information in order to create like the response to government and ask, providing the ask and asking for the better environmental protection. So I think that I will continue this research in regard to be focused more still on vulnerability, because as I have a knowledge and I work on environmental health, it's a big thing, but there are also the other aspects of the environment as such. And I think that we need to create like the policies where the young generation would participate equally, by really being asked like how they feel about the future and what they want to see when it comes to environment. Because I'm quite sure that we, as someone who is at 43, I have, I guess, different perspective of how I want to see, like, for example, the energy sector to be built, based on environmental protection acts and so on. And I guess that someone who is 19 years old have a different perspective, and I guess the different vision of the future they want to live in. So I would really, as we spoke during the policy hackathon, it was really wonderful format as well. I would like really to say thank you to organizing that, because it was really important to involve the young generations as well as the fellows here, but to create a safe space so we can be very honest and to speak about like what we are faced with as the generations living at the present moment. So it is really wonderful to be, as someone who has spent a lot of years in the NGO, being given the opportunity to work on the research. I would like to thank you really honestly for that, because we usually don't get a lot of chances to be given the funds to do the research, and that's why we are missing a lot of reference documents and the knowledge around how to go further with those ideas. So thank you so much for the foundation and for the institute for having us here, and of course thanks everyone also for joining the cohort and the very valuable insights about their work. Thanks.
So thank you, Sergeant, and thank you, Vanya. I think that you pretty nicely described what this fellowship for you as fellows was about. I would like to give word now to Irena Fiket, the researcher from Institute of Philosophy and Social Theory, who was leading the part of the project that was implementing deliberative workshops across the Western Balkans, researching youth perspectives, and she will regional findings and present it here.
Thank you very much, all of you. This is the research we did together. I did it with together my colleagues Gazela and Nemanja Angelkovic. He's also here. If you will go deep in the questions, I will leave to him as younger researcher to answer that. What we're trying to do here is to understand, to go actually beyond what we obtain from the research, what is done with pre-formulated questions on that gave us stable, somehow fixed answers from the youth, and to understand what are their perceptions. So we did it in qualitative way. We organized deliberative workshops in 6 Western Balkan capitals. So this is basically our design. We had a full day deliberative forums that brought together a sample of youth in 6 Western Balkan capitals. It's not representative sample. We didn't even aim to do that. But we took care that it is diverse, that is inclusive, and this is the way how we deal with it within the forums, as so they discuss in the way that reflects some deliberative ideals. So they're inclusive, they respect heterogeneity, and try to understand each other. So I will explain this deeper later. We have 92 participants in totals. Numbers varying across countries, so this is why we cannot go deep into the country specificities and differences. But if you have, in some cases, I mentioned some specificities of the countries, but the sample was small, so it's better to talk in terms of trends in all the sample. We put an effort to include participants with limited prior knowledge or interest in Europe affairs. So to deal with the self-selection that actually usually occurs when you talk about these topics. However, I'm not sure how we succeed in that, but because it's always the case that when you invite people to stay all day, the people who are more interested or more informed will participate. So, and we put attention to gender, age, education, and ethnic background. And then we produced this qualitative data that all workshops were recorded, and then the recordings used for the analysis. So let me go to the next slide. I will present key themes that were actually, that we discovered through the analysis and discussions that were the main themes or dimensions in discussion. This is the Europe as political actor and institutions, and the youth that discuss seeing Europe as both regulator and guarantor of standards, democracy, rule of law, human rights, social protections. These rules and bureaucracy lend credibility, predictability, stability, but also generate distance and complexity in youth. They saw financial and technical support as something that is valued, that is important to them, but they criticized Europe for weak follow-up and enforcement gap that actually exists, and we observe that is between formal expectations and outcomes of the EU. is admired for its founding principles, as we said before, but criticized for uneven standards and slow progress. Young people actually called during all the workshops for more active monitoring, clearer communication, and a mechanism to ensure compliance with agreed reforms. So this is some hints from the discussions. Europe is framed as a teacher or advisor, but criticized when its approach is distant or moralizing. It serves as a reference model for how systems should function. Western Balkans as inside, outside Europe, the youth in our groups, actually primary identification then with Balkans, they have acute awareness of marginal status in the EU membership and decision making. They have consistent experience of belonging without membership. In fact, one of the key phrases they repeat was this belonging without membership. And they perceived EU as waiting room they feel that they are in some waiting room. So they felt culturally and socially European, but politically peripheral. As I said, EU integration is described as a waiting room. Enlargement is perceived as selective and uneven, exposing double standards towards candidate countries, but not disengagement. They're still engaged in Europe, they're still interested in Europe, they still perceive Europe as a space of opportunity, reference, aspiration. As we showed previously, they appreciate the value Europe promotes, but on the other hand, they are really critical and they see this as a consistency in promoting the values. Okay, they perceive this as tempered by structural limits and perceived inequalities. This is another theme that we saw in the discussions. They recognize Europe as a globally relevant and economic and institutional way. They give it this weight, but they criticize it for political passivity and limited decisiveness in global affairs. For example, they had strong normative expectation that Europe be value-driven and consistent, for example, in the war in Ukraine, but then they criticize it because they thought that the clear stance was desired, but Europe didn't provide it. So they see all this, they want Europe to be normative power, but on the other hand, they see all the problems Europe have with having less strong words as they would like to. So they see Europe as setting good rules and norms, yet failing to translate rhetoric into tangible actions, especially in this crisis and conflict. But on the other hand, when compared with the United States, Russia, and China as powers, they have Europe have normative appeals, but versus limited operational capacity. Overall, they see it as a normative power whose authority is weakened, but indecision and internal divisions, undermining its credibility in supporting regional reform and security. Okay. And we also actually observe some core paradoxes. Youth in Western Balkans feel that they belong, they sense of this belonging to Europe, but without membership. So they have this strong cultural, social proximity, value proximity that coexist in their perception with the sense of formal exclusion. They have normative hope, but with institutional distrust, where Europe remains attractive as a normative power, but credibility is weakened by inconsistency related to the EU integration, this waiting group we were mentioning, and double standards they perceive. Then they see as a problematic that EU have high expectation of youth, and there are different programs directed to youth, but then on the other hand, this youth doesn't have real chances to influence anything in Europe. So it's somehow they perceive it as something that is not real. They are not consulted really. They just symbolically called to be consulted. And they see Europe as a model, but distant as bureaucracy. They admire EU rules, rule of law, and all these basic rights EU promote, but they feel procedures opaque and remote. So this is the major hints are persistent gap between commitment to norms, identification with EU values, and actual possibility to participate in political life and to influence something both at EU and national level. Slideshow. They underlined also key issues and priorities, what EU, but also domestic actors should address. These are three cross-cutting priorities: education, mobility, and employment. First one is education and civic literacy. They see it as a tool for empowerment, inclusion, practical and labor relevant. Civic literacy as prerequisite for participation and for countering misinformation and polarization. Mobility, they appreciate a lot mobility. Erasmus and trainerships, that makes in their head Europe tangible, but opportunities are uneven, so they complain about that. Bureaucracy is slow, diploma recognition is problematic, and there is selective inclusion in this problem. So they appreciate, but they're critical. This is the finding that we repeat in all the dimensions we identify in their discussions. So and third one is employment and fair labor market access. They appreciate Europe for entrepreneurship support, and they think it should be promoted. Green and digital jobs tied to reducing drain. But they, at the same time, as I said, always see structural obstacles, corruption, fragile institutions, inconsistent enforcement. This is something they often complained about. Calls for accountability, conditionality, and transparency in EU support in domestic context. And there is this emotional landscape that we detected that I already, in all the slides I presented something from that. Hope is a dominant emotion. It is tied to normative ideals, opportunity and advancement. Europe is seen as potential stabilizing and unifying force, but there is also this frustration and mistrust. Slow integration, perceived double standards, the gap between rhetoric and action. At the same time, the good news is that skepticism rarely means rejections. They just call for more coherent, credible, and inclusive engagements. And that emotions shape participation, that tangible inclusion turns hope into activism, and distance turns skepticism into disengagement. So there is an interplay of hope, frustration, skepticism, and occasional fatigue. Okay, this is what they want. To recommend Europe to move from consultation to co-creation. They want more direct channels of influence, not just to state it that they want something to do with youth, but to communicate, not only through national elites, because they are aware that national elites are corrupted. There is all these problems we mentioned until now. Then they want permanent structures, like youth councils and advisory platforms and municipal, national, regional, and EU levels. They want to have real policy influence through monitoring reforms, EU funds, and implementations. And they want broader access to mobility, Erasmus, and all these key priorities I showed at the previous slide. So in their head, Europe's appeal, actually what we saw is that Europe's appeal depends on translating values into tangible policy, enabling young people to act as agents of choice. They want to be structurally included, actually, where decisions are shaped, not only to be consulted and not to have real political influence, and not just to have statements that they matter, that Europe want to hear you out, but then they don't have a real channels of influence. These are implications for actions. Consistency builds credibility. They want transparent criteria, equal application of standards, explanation of delays. They want to support from you, they want support domestic reform, rule of law, accountability, civic literacy, local youth structures, which, as we explained, they want this direct link with the EU, not through national governance system. They want values to be turned into the visible impact. to show results in education, employment, civic participation, and everyday life. And they want Europe to lead coherently in crisis, to have more decisive foreign security policy and more strong regional engagement. Overall, young people in Western Balkans are not Eurosceptics. They are like disappointed realists. They're asking for fair rules, visible results, real influence, clear communication, domestic reform support, and the Europe that acts consistently. Možda sljedeća, možda bi mogla, there's some, maybe we can go later into that. There's some specificities, which I said I can go back to if you ask some questions, but it's more qualitative, the samples are small, so I would prefer to finish it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Irena. This is Shada. So do you want to ask questions now, or do we wish to hear presentation of a quantitative report that the OSF Western Balkans did, so then we can maybe have rounds of questions if you're interested? Okay, so as I said previously, the deliberative workshop reports were somehow influencing also the essay production of our fellows. But one important research that was done by Open Society Foundation Western Balkans is the youth perspectives in Western Balkans and what does the Gen Z tells us. And this report somehow emerged in the conversation for many of the researchers when we were at the CERES island at the Project Surgery Week. And then we have therefore decided that as it was important resource for whole of this year of fellowship and for the topic and theme, we decided to invite Arasli Tepelja from OSF Western Balkans to present the research also with us.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for the space to actually present some of our findings from this report. Thank you for the kind words as well. I'm very glad that you found it very useful for also for as a background for your research. I'm going to be as brief as possible, but please have in mind that our methodology involved a survey of 6,000 people, and that was later validated with 19 focus groups. There were like roughly 1,000 surveys per country in the region, and we did they were all face-to-face, and then we had these focus groups where we had the chance to validate everything, starting from the questions to then at the end the recommendations. We, modesty aside, we believe we have produced something we have conducted some survey that's first of its kind in the Western Balkans. It's something that hasn't been done before with at least at this scale with the Gen Z, with the generation entirely. And we also took this idea from several studies that were happening at the time in Europe and in UK. So what I'll try to do briefly is to get you through the what this generation sort of believes, how it relates to politics, how they see Europe, where do they see the future, and how does it what does that mean for the region in general. We thought of before starting with before going to the politics of it, we decided to first see the democratic parameters of the discussion, and this is something that's I think very interesting and a bit controversial. And I would like to start by quoting Ivan Krastev, whom we had in Brussels when we launched this this report earlier in March this year. And he mentioned how he said how for democracy to function, 3 conditions must be met, and that's for the people to believe that the future is open, for them to think that they can influence it, and for them to actually feel that their choices will matter in a short period of time or even in their lifetime. And what we see is that most of the time this is not true for the Western Balkans, for the Gen Z in the Western Balkans, as 73% of them feel they have little to no influence in the politics, and this leaves us with a sort of disengagement of here you see 71.1%. But then going back to the democratic parameters, we see how almost 80% believe that democracy is the best form for of government to have. I mean, 42.5% of them, which is a high figure, believe that it's a strong yes, and 37% to yes to some degree. But I think it's even more important when you compare it to their average peer, to their peers in the EU, who average 57%, and Germany, who is one of the highest rankers, is at 71% compared to our 80. We also asked them if they're how interested they are to in politics, and it seems that they feel at 71% of them that they're disengaged from formal politics. They are not. They show little interest. They don't want to engage with the formal politics of their countries, and at the same time, though, they still tell us that they at 67% they will 67% they will go and cast a vote in the next elections. I think this is very important to show how a lot of the democratic parameters are there in place, and then the mere fact that they're not involved and they feel they cannot influence the politics in their countries, in their respective communities, actually leads them to be disengaged from this. Also, one other data that we have from this is the fact that their favorite political activity is protest, and I think we saw that happening in real life as well in some of the countries, with 19% of them. It's not, maybe it doesn't seem like too much here, but compared to other forums, it's much higher than the rest of the solutions proposed, because this was an open question and they could also give their own ideas of how to deal with their discontentment and everything. And also the fact that if they see that the leader is taking unlawful decisions on the or unlawful power on the society, they will then again at 40% go and protest against it. Then we see something else that's not to be yeah, sorry, this is more on the what they would do again, the protest of the Gen Z, how would they protest against unlawful power. This we see as a post ideology in the questionnaire, in the questionnaire, in the surveys. Most of the respondents will not take sides in ideology. They're equally divided on the left and the right, but very low at some 8% for each. What they will instead show, also validated with a focus groups, is that they show tendencies of both being also liberal but also conservative at the same time. So this is why we use the word here, that they could be characterized as liberal conservatives. They consider themselves much more progressive than their parents, but at the same time they very much believe in the nuclear family as a core unit of the community and the state, and also they rely a lot on the family for their to build their lives, or for as a center, as a gravitational center for them. Then we saw that instead of the ideology, the Gen Z is much more interested in reforms and fair system of governance. And I also heard in the other presentations how they have they are familiar with concepts of and values of rule of law, of democracy, and yes, they do support them, even though they seem a bit disengaged or non-ideological, but they will definitely support fair systems of governance and the rule of law and quality education, economic security and opportunity, and better healthcare services in their countries. Which brings us to the EU question. I very much like and I think it also validates our findings, the idea of the belonging without membership, both socially and culturally. We also found that it is true for the Gen Z in the region. They will overwhelmingly support the integration and accession to the EU at 76.2%. They feel that their countries should join the EU, even though sometimes they feel it's not maybe at 11 or so percent, that it's not maybe the most important thing, but they still should do it. And also the fact that they are very or like somewhat hopeful, which was another element that surfaced during the other presentations, how they're they feel hopeful and they believe that by 2030 at 24.1% their countries will actually become members of the European Union, or then if not that by 2035. But also we feel a risk in this on the fact that for this generation, the European perspective is not just some sort of policy, but it's more of a yeah, the belonging we mentioned earlier, but also what everything they want to have for the future, like very much related to how they perceive their future. And the risk in that is that on the fact that they may become very much disappointed and cynical over time. I know how it's very much of a cliche to bring back the promise of Thessaloniki, which now is 23 years ago when you talk about EU enlargement, but it's actually a lot of years and it's an entire generation. 23 years is a lot, and we still don't see, except for Montenegro and perhaps Albania, a clear path or a clear date for other countries who can actually join the EU. So 47.2% of them expect also that their living standards in their countries will match those of the EU in the next 10 years. And for this generation, accession is very much tied to tangible outcomes, as they expect for the process to translate into how life is actually lived. And I think they're also something that came out during the focus groups is also how that they link a lot of their lifestyle with the accession. And then there's the issue of brain stay, we called it, because this was a very surprising figure that we found out. At almost 65% of the respondents told us that they see their future in the Western Balkans, as opposed to 23% of them who are, so to a certain degree. They, of course, it's again tied to the accelerated accession in the EU, but the prevailing assumption is that they will actually stay in the region given the opportunity and given the changes that they require from their politicians. And this only 23% is only because we feel that who see that they don't see a future in the country. It's only that because we imagine that these figures would have been reversed actually, and a lot more people would actually want to leave the region. Instead, they feel that they want to stay. which brings me to the next point, which is a happy and hopeful generation. I know this also came out of the other studies that were presented earlier. 86.6% of them are happy or somewhat happy with their lives in the region, and 72% of them are hopeful that their lives will improve in the next 5 years. With this in this generation, we defined a good life as having a well-paid job and a satisfying one with strong personal relationships, and the labor market issue and their labor experience was also very important for them, with 56% of them who wanted to have hybrid or flexible working hours, and this was very much confirmed also in the focus groups later. And this is more in detail how they responded to this question. So I'm going to move to some of the recommendations that we have. We saw those as opportunities more than recommendations, and we validated those in the IGNITA forum that we did last year in Prizren in Kosovo. First of all, it was very important for everyone to not take this sort of optimism for granted. This, of course, Gen Z's optimism in the Western Balkans can be a real catalyst for change, as we put it here, but this window will not remain open forever. And should the accession stall forever, no one is to know where this will actually lead to. And their critical outlook and belief in democracy and reforms also should be leveraged both by governments and the EU. And finally, some more concrete recommendations is on the fact that they need to be more engaged into formal politics, into political processes in general, by first building political education, by putting them more at the core of political discussions, and bring the governance more into a local level, which is something that Europe pursues as well, but is something very difficult to achieve. But it needs to be a joint effort from everyone to bring governance closer to people. And yes, of course, also effective peace building. But then on the question of connecting, there were these very interesting recommendations that came out from here. That's, of course, mobility within the region and from the region to the EU, but also between the cities, like intercity mobility is very important for them, and also bringing more life to secondary cities who are increasingly being abandoned and underfunded. Then more recommendations are related to healthcare, with special focus on the mental health support, and then in education, in better housing, better economic incentives, mobility, inclusiveness, social and economic and civic youth engagement infrastructure. These are more directed to national governments, but I think can be very much related also with the EU. We have this convergence to EU project where we see that a lot of these issues, socioeconomic indicators, will actually change given the chance to access more funding from the EU, or if EU membership is actually achieved. So like in different scenarios where we actually get closer to the EU, a lot of these issues will also be tackled. And finally, related to this Europe issue, is to actually deliver Europe and not merely create member states, but also Europeans. This is a cohort of Europeans, so they need to see a credible and tangible path, while of course the reform is ongoing. And finally, to be more connected with their peers in the EU. I'll stop here, but I'll be glad to take questions should you have any.
Thank you so much. So before I open floor for some questions, I think that this is a great opportunity to continue with explaining what Policy Hackathon was and what experiment we did based on the research that Irena was presenting and also that Arslan was presenting, being that two rather similar topics were done in qualitative and quantitative type of methodology, which delivered, I think, rich baseline and resources for something that was experimented with, also with young people who were part of deliberative workshops, but also with fellows who were doing their own fellowship research. So I would like to give a floor to our hackathon master, as we call him, Srđan Đurović, to continue, and then we can open floor for some questions.
Thank you for an opportunity to tell a little bit about this, demystify this policy hackathon thing, which is here. And I actually want to start and put it in a bit of a context of what the Institute is trying to do, and together within the RECAS network, which is a regional network. Institute is trying to build on this legacy of an engaged institution and believes that the research we produce is somehow supposed to make some social impact as well. And one of the kind of, let's say, we use this roadblocks to this is basically that very much of the research produced, very much good research produced in this region as well is actually rarely reaching these important social processes such as policy making, right? And how these policies are made and how are they decided upon and so on. So the Institute has actually been trying within the RECAS framework to work on this, and one of the innovations we last year was this idea that we should try to make research produced by the researchers in the region more kind of accessible to decision makers and general public. So we created this socially relevant research repository where we're actually trying to push all the research produced by our fellows through our fellowship program, but also other research produced by the institutions, parts of the RECAS framework, so in a way which is accessible to decision makers and the public, and that is an online repository of the research. This year we try to build on that and try to actually not only see the youth as kind of objects we research, which is very important to know what they feel, but also try to experiment in how we can actually engage in a real collaborative process of working together. So researchers, our fellows and youth working together on a very specific issue. And that's why the policy hackathon, right? It should resemble this format where people would come together and hack a thing, which means try to understand how that works, but also try to provide some of the solutions in that area. So what we've been doing for the past 2 days, and many of the participants of the hackathon are still here, even though some of them left, was actually building on this research which was produced. We took into account the deliberative workshops, we took into account this quantitative research, and we tried to sit for 2 days and try, based on that, to produce common material, common understanding of what is the vision and what should be the vision of the youth, and not only of the youth. I have to stress that, because I hope what we've achieved in the hackathon, and I believe we did, is to actually erase this difference, because I've never saw any kind of hierarchy between these researchers and young students who were engaged, and I think that was good. But we tried to map this vision, basically starting from a very personal, but also very rooted in research, hopes and fears of youth, and I again say not only of youth, and what and how they are actually shaping on, how can we imagine our societies in 2050? That was our goal. So we went through. There were the main ideas that we've actually discussed: the eco-digital future of the Western Balkans, because that's what emerged through all this research, are these dominant trends which are shaping the future of the region. But another thing which emerged in the research, and we called it here a social dimension, but it's actually this political imaginary, and that is the importance of actually democracy and democratic infrastructures needed for these visions to come through. So they were divided in 3 teams. One was a team which was kind of trying to map the vision on ecological futures, in a sense, what is it and how we imagine our life to be. The second team was working on tech and AI. AI took a lot of discussions, and I think that is something that's really needed. A lot of those discussions are needed because I think there is already a generation gap in what is perceived by the young population, by the youth, of where the AI is taking us and what the potentials are, but also what doubts are. And I think, to be honest, in a sense, I was very impressed with the discussions on that, because I think that there is an equal balance of both hopes and fears regarding the AI among the youth. And I think they even see it much better than some of the older people, and even more knowledgeable about what all the dangers about that are. And the third theme was actually dealing with social issues. And I was even at some point a bit of complainer, because what actually emerged as a really strong theme and topic is that all of these other visions are actually determined on whether we hack how the democracies work. So in a sense, functioning both elections, but also participatory democracy mechanisms and inclusion of youth is something that's seen as a major roadblock in all of these paths. And it actually came together. We were trying also to do these divergence and convergent paths, and how much are these future kind of codependent, but also diverging and depend what is happening in different regions. But I'm not going to present it here. We finished yesterday, at least 2 days, and we'll have these materials ready and shown later. But the main point, which I want to be the main takeaway and the message here, is actually that very often the policy consultation processes are seen as a very technical and expert-driven issues. They are, they should be, that's by no mistake. But there is this phase in the processes where inclusion of youth makes much more sense, and that is conceptualizing and setting goals of specific policies. And that is something that does not require very much expert knowledge. It requires a genuine reflection on what and how people want and where they want to live. And those are the areas where it's so much easier to include youth than in a formal and the end of the procedure consultations, where youth is asked to consult on a very technical issues, which are so boring and not interesting. And not only that, but are so expert driven. It needs to come back to a very basic discussions about means and ends and goals of societies, communities, and people living, because very often really they don't think about chapter 23 and the section 5 of a specific law. They think about very specific issues they would like to materialize in their lives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant. Yeah, before we close this event, I would like to give a floor. I would like to mention a few of the people who are still here, and to thank all of the students who came from a region to be part of the policy hackathon and also of this event. I also wish to say thank you to all of the fellows who I see that are still online, even after a very busy online day that they have, and also wish to open the floor for potential questions or comments if anybody has some.
Obviously. Yeah, thank you very much. I have been listening the presentation of the Gen Z research project in Brussels like a week ago, so I'm quite knowledgeable about the findings. And it was really striking that now in what Srđan presented from the hackathon, that there is strong coherence actually of the finding when we speak about young generations. And I think this is really, really important. And when you were all speaking, I was thinking, okay, we have such a alignment of young people, which is very clear about demand that they are the one who should be asked and should take part in decision making on one side, and not only demand in some which are not only in Serbia, I would say in Serbia it's clear what's happening. They're also stepping in and taking, action towards being decision makers. I mean, we saw what happened in Bangladesh, for example, that is like the further that they went. And another, when I look at the global scene and what we have is that we have in most important country very old people actually who are decision makers and who are actually on the future of all these generations. And it's amazing that we actually see the clash between the very old generation, which is dying out. Maybe I could say fortunately, but yeah. And really new generation, Gen Z, who are stepping, and I feel somewhere in the middle of all of this, what is happening, I observe both, and I think this is a really interesting time to be alive and to see that, but it's also very challenging because what I see is actually that if maybe our generation doesn't understand and what are of young generations, that we are going to have so many conflicts, and they are saying us very clearly what they want. And I think we need somehow, and I think all these, what we have here, presentation of 3 parts actually of the research, 4 parts, including the fellows which we have, is a part of attempt to send a clear message to those who are currently decision makers that this is not the way. So we need to do some things differently, and there are people here who know how different things. And I just wanted to end with this. It's really important that we take this seriously.
Anybody? Somebody online that wants to share something, pose a question, say something? Okay, nobody. Yeah, so for the closure, what I would like to say maybe that is in line with what Gazela just said, maybe a little bit personal, but also in that line and feeling. I was a part of the youth movement on another topic for such a long time, and what I saw and what we experienced on a micro level is exactly that issue, that older generation does not open space for younger people to actually engage. And older generation, even in a position of decision-making processes, does not have tools or skills or, how to say, will to actually open space and share the knowledge for young people to actually engage. In my personal road where I am right now, I had to do all of that on my own with my fellow colleagues at the EU level, at the UN level, at the national level. But then we had to learn all by ourselves. And I also think that the quality part in what we should do as middle generation that I am right now is actually that, to learn how to open spaces and to learn how to make space for them to actually do what they want. And I think that this is something that we could think about in the future. And I will stop here now, and I think that this is good message for the end. And before I say thank you to our donors, I also wish to thank members of regional networks for advanced studies, because without them and without regional support and without our partners and members who are actually doing the work in their own countries, we will not be able to do this successfully in the 3rd year, and hopefully we will do it next year as well. Thank you.